That Great Business Show. Winner, highly commended award. Irish Podcast Awards.
Welcome to episode 199 of That Great Business Show, where we put the great into business tips, insights and opportunities, and that is on every episode. We're the perfect length for your 5k walk, or you can also hear us on board Aer Lingus long-haul flights, where we are their proud podcast partners. I'm Conal Amora and Fáilte. What a reaction to the Paddy Mead triptych. That's the series of 3 podcasts we did with former Bonhams Auctioneers CEO Paddy Mead, who told us, amongst many other things, how to sell a dinosaur. I guess if you can sell a dinosaur, you can sell anything. It is well worth a listen, starting with episode 195, which is just one long laugh about his exploits with his gavel, and it also involves drinking from a cup of tea where somebody's teeth were in it. It's just a laugh. In business, controlling costs is essential. That includes your business fleet's fuel costs. Maxall, a family-owned business since 1920, are big supporters of That Great Business Show. Maxall fuel cards offer tailored solutions for transport fleets of all sizes, delivering efficient fuel cost management for your business at over 700 service stations nationwide. The Maxall dedicated fuel card team wants to hear from you at maxall.ie/fuel cards. And this is episode 199, where we will be talking about mediation in business, the new way of saving disputing businesses money, or another way of taking hard-earned money off them. Also, who knows what's next in the UK, but if you're trying to do business there, it isn't getting any easier. But we have some insider knowledge for you about all of that. Now, many of you may not know our stable of podcasts that we continue to build up. We're almost 4 years into with that Great Business Show. We have just started the digital government podcast called Transformed Gov, and we have had a huge response to our legal podcast, which is called The Fifth Court. And that has won awards and a loyal following, not just of lawyers, but of people generally in business who want to know how the law can affect them. So on this episode, it is my great pleasure to welcome back to That Great Business Show one half of the 2-person Fifth Court team, Peter Leonard, barrister and mediator, to talk to me about the rise of mediation in business. As I mentioned earlier, cynical old me just wonders if it's effective both in time and cost, or is it just another way of taking money off businesses? Peter Leonard, welcome back to That Great Business Show.
Thank you, Conal. Delighted to be back.
That voice. People pay extra for that. Do you know that?
Well, you're so kind. You're so kind.
Since you were on last, you have become a mediator on top of all your other legal pieces of paper. Why did you choose to do a mediation course and do very well in it as well?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Conal. Yeah, no, somebody told me mediation is the future, Conal, so I said I better get in there. I'm reminded of The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman all those years ago. Plastics are the future. Wasn't that the line from that movie?
There were many other ones as well.
Okay,
My name is Rizzo, not Ratzo.
No, mediation, I have become a huge convert.
Midnight Cowboy, sorry.
Midnight Cowboy, oh yeah. John Voight. I remember it well. The streets of New York, oh my God. I have become a huge convert to mediation, and mediation is still relatively new in the world of dispute resolution. I mean, obviously, it's as old as Christendom. You can go back to the Brehon laws, you can go back to Julius Caesar, and you can get into court and you can fight your case and you can accuse the other person across the room, and then somebody in the middle, an adjudicator or a judge even, can make a decision, and that is litigation. It can be very expensive and it can be very difficult for the parties because, even though law is generally applied in disputes and, disputes should follow the legal precedents and should go in accordance with that, you never know how the old ball is going to hop, Conal. And therefore, you're leaving everything to chance and you're leaving it to a judge. And I mean, that's the perfect way to do it. And obviously that's provided by the state. The state pay for the judge and all of that sort of stuff. And if you win, isn't it great? You come out and you high five. But if you lose, and sometimes you lose in circumstances where you didn't expect to lose, or you lose big, much bigger than you thought you were going to. And I have to come out and explain to my clients Heartbroken though I am, but I have to be professional and say, look, you've lost. It didn't work out, etc., etc. I only say that because that is litigation, and that is the system that is generally used to resolve disputes. I fall out with you, Conall. We go to a judge, third party decides it, and we argue our case, and we have to prepare our respective cases. So mediation has kind of come into play. Again, it started in the States. Sorry, I'm
going to cut you there for a second, because I want to just put the frighteners on people. Commercial litigation, by its nature, attracts big fees. How much does one day out in the High Court cost?
How long is a piece of string?
I knew you were going to say that. But you're talking
when you're talking about the expertise of the participants, it's crazy money. It is crazy, crazy money. And it's getting more expensive. And weirdly, people are willing to pay it. I shouldn't really be saying that. I'm saying that against the legal profession. But I mean, it is crazily expensive. If you have, corporate firms on board, you'll have partners, you'll have associates, then you'll have barristers coming into the mix. Then you probably will need experts to advise in relation to the dispute. And that could go on for a couple of days, and there's daily rates, and then there's brief fees and crazy stuff. As you know, Ireland is the centre of aviation disputes at the moment. And we heard figures of 6-figure sums in brief fees for certain counsel. Now that's highly unusual. I think you were in Fungarola when that story was breaking, Conall. So I'm just saying it can be crazy. Now, obviously, commercial disputes are, that is a once-off. But, I mean, it is very, very expensive, and mediation is a very, very cost-effective alternative to that, and in my view, can be a much better alternative for many reasons.
Now, I'm going to cut across you again, because you say commercial litigation is they're one-off, but a newspaper wouldn't exist. Business pages in the newspapers would not exist were it not for the constant amount of litigation.
Sorry, you misheard me there, Conall. I was just saying in terms of that crazy aviation type case where the fees are at such a gigantic level. But I mean, commercial disputes happen every day. As we speak, two parties are falling out, Conall, and thanks be to God for it.
Okay.
There you go.
So now, back to your mediation. So therefore, you're telling me it's a bigger, better way of doing it.
And it really, I think mediation is only in its infancy in Ireland. Like a lot of things, Conall, mediation started across the Atlantic with our friends in America, and then it moved to the UK. Now, I trained with CEDR. It's a well-known mediation organisation, the Centre for Effective Dispute Resolution, and it's highly regarded.
They're the posh ones. Go on.
Well, look, whatever. So it was really, really good. And I mean, there is a process and there is a system that you employ, which is very effective at resolving disputes. And only recently I was in London. I was invited over by them to participate in a mediation over there, kind of big commercial mediation. And it was just incredible to see how effective it was. In the course of a day, we had resolved very, very complicated legal issues. Both sides had come in with quite strong positions, and we worked throughout the day, back and forth, all the way, ironing out issues, addressing potential sticking problems, and eventually got to a situation where both sides were willing to agree, and everybody shook hands and went home, and an agreement was signed, and money changed hands, of course it did, but a lot of money was saved on both sides as a result of avoiding expensive litigation.
Am I hearing that the process is kind of psychologically driven? That, make people not be so stuck?
Yeah, well, you see, so effectively for mediation to work, in my view, I mean, often people think mediation is just another form of negotiation. So you go down to the forecourts, I'm representing you, Conall, you're in a row with somebody else, I meet with the barrister on the other side, we go and I'll say, look, I want 100,000, they say, we'll give you 20,000, and then we meet in the middle and we agree for 50,000 or 60,000 or whatever it is. And that's a form of kind of horse trading, really, I mean, it can be a little bit more sophisticated than that, but that's effectively what it is. Mediation is very different. So effectively what you do is you have two parties who are coming to this in a voluntary capacity. Now, that's very, very important. They want to be there because they're looking for a solution. Okay.
Is that driven by cash? Is that money driven as in, geez, I'm not going to spend 100,000 quid?
Yes, it can be, but there can be other factors involved. Remember, it is private, Conall. That's huge. Okay, you go into court, you'll have, the gentlemen and ladies of the press with their notebooks down the back taking a note of this, and it can appear in the Irish Times the next day. People don't like that. So mediation is done in private. But the wonderful thing about it is if you can gain the trust of the mediator and the skill of the mediator is all important. Not everybody is a good mediator and not every good litigator is a good mediator. I think that's a fair comment to make. So on the basis of the skill of the mediator, you gain the trust of the parties. You go from one room to the next. Both parties, it's not that they think you're on their side, but you create confidence so that they're open to possibilities, they're willing to discuss, they'll set out positions. The fundamental principle of mediation is confidentiality. Confidentiality.
Okay.
So I'm in a room with you, Conal, and I say, look, this is it. So let's talk about it. Is there anything you want to say? And you know yourself, people are kind of cagey by nature, especially if there's Bugs Bunny involved. They don't want to show their hand. They don't want to show their hand.
My learned friend,
so
Mr. Leonard, is referring to money when he says Bugs Bunny.
So I mean, it's all about trying to gain the confidence of people, and that's very important. And the personality of the mediator is important. And also, Conal, just to use my other line, you have to be Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to
fold them.
Yes. So it's very important.
But
you have to be able to judge the room.
Are you, as a mediator, on one side or the other?
No.
So I'm in dispute with Jack Smith. So I say I want to go and resolve this through mediation. Do I then go and ring Peter Leonard and say, would you do mediation? Or do I ring up Peter Leonard and say, I'm looking for a mediator? Where do I go?
What generally happens in commercial disputes, for example, or any dispute, I mean, employment disputes are always very good for mediation. Construction disputes, really good. Mediation really works in those situations. And situations like that, family disputes over wills, probate, ideal for mediation. And mediation can address issues like, for example, if it's a probate dispute, it's family fallout over a will. I mean, that's as old, that goes back to old God's time, and it's very, very sad. But a mediator, a skilled mediator who has a bit of empathy and who can engage with somebody can go between the two parties and they can create the atmosphere which will lead to a solution in private. Remember, things to do with family, privacy is so important.
But who has hired you? Is it, do both sides say, we want Peter Leonard? Or does Jack Smith say, Peter Leonard's my man, and I say, oh no, Mark Tottenham's my pal?
Okay, very good question. Okay, so what would happen is, the representatives of Party A say to Party B, what about mediation? And they say, okay, we agree to that. So Party A will say, look, we're going to recommend 3 mediators, and you come back and see if you're happy with any one of those and select one. And then we'll contact that individual and see if that individual is available. It's as simple as that. But it's very important that you get the right mediator. Now, obviously, Conal, I'm working in this field, so I think I'm wonderful. But I'm just saying it is important that people sometimes people are recommended. I think, there are mediators for certain circumstances. So then once the mediator is appointed, the mediation commences. Okay, so initial contacts, that's all part of the mediation. It feeds into the mediation. So generally what I would do in that situation is I'd contact both parties and I'd ask both parties to prepare a brief submission, not a crazy legal submission like you get in the High Court, but something which sets out the points that are important to them. And that allows the parties to focus on what is important. If you know what I mean. A short, brief summary is always better than a big, lengthy, where you throw in everything, including the kitchen sink.
But people want to do that because they hate each other at that time.
So, I'm trying to control it at this stage. Now, remember, it's all voluntary and everything, people only engage when they're happy to engage. That's very, very important, okay? But in terms of the 2 opening submissions, and you exchange those, then I would have a brief Zoom interaction with either of the parties, get to know them, find out who has authority. That's always very important. You don't want to go into a room where nobody has authority. You want somebody who can make a decision. That's important to establish that right at the start.
What do you ask? Have you the power to say yes or no?
You engage with people, but you do it in a very informal way. Conal. So I'm sitting down with you and your lawyers and I'm saying, okay, I've seen what this is about.
No wigs and cloaks.
No wigs and cloaks. No, none of that. None of that. And it's not litigation. The mediator there is to facilitate. But it's not a case, there's lots of mediation out there and, official mediation and people just kind of turn up and say, well, John is looking for the car. And Mary says, no, well, I want the house. And, they're saying the car, and they're saying that. There's no value in any of that. What you need is to understand what the issues are. No case has a counsel of perfection, Conal. There are always going to be infirmities. There are always going to be weaknesses. There will always be vulnerabilities. Take, for example, inheriting a family house. For example, maybe it's ironclad in the sense that the will seems to be unimpeachable. But, there's an emotional fallout. There's something there. They don't want unhappiness. So come together and let's work out, a solution to that where both parties can go away, maybe both go away unhappy, but go away with a compromise, and it makes people feel better. So then what happens is you sign up to a mediation agreement where both parties agree to mediate. And they'll obviously have to also, confirm that they're willing to pay the fees of the mediator. And then practical considerations are important. For example, you need, let's say, to go to a hotel, hire a hotel. If it's a solicitor's firm, a major solicitor's firm, they probably may have offices that you can use, which would be more cost effective. But you need a separate room for each party. And then you need a common room that people can come into. Now, every mediation I ever did before I trained with the Cedar crowd in London, we never ever had a plenary session. The two parties never came together.
What's a plenary session?
Plenary session would be where you bring both parties into the same room and they kind of face off against each other, but in a very controlled and gentle way. Okay? So normally what happens is, people get their room and they sit in the room and there's tea and coffee in the corner and they stay there till 5 o'clock, and then hopefully there's a resolution, and every now and again there's an interaction. But really, to make this work, what you would do is start the process, bring both sides in, nominate an individual on both sides just to open and say what their position is. So it allows the other side to get a flavour of it. Just get a flavour of it at the start. Then you go back to your respective rooms. Mediator will go in, start with one party and say, okay, so look, just let's talk through your case at the moment. So you're saying you want, 500,000 because you did X, Y, and Z. And, the other side, you've heard from them there and they have just said, how do you feel about that? How do you talk about it? And you get into it and you get going and you start working through it. And you remind people that this is entirely confidential. You will not say anything to the other side unless you get specific permission. And it is very, very important that when you're leaving the room, you're saying, are you okay if I say you're making an offer of 20 euros? Are you okay if I tell the other side that? And you want to make sure that they're happy about that. Because remember, mediation, if it doesn't work, it has a great chance of working, Conal. I'm a great believer in it, and I think generally it should work. But if it doesn't work, you still go back to court, and therefore people don't want to give too much away if it's not happening. But then if the dynamic is beginning, in the course of the day, movement occurs, and it is up to the skill of the mediator to work with people to identify issues that they might be concerned about, again in a very gentle way, to kind of point out, well, the other side seems to be emphasizing this. What do you think about that? Is that something that you need to consider? How strongly do you feel about that? All these questions you work in and you engage with, and there is a dynamic that develops, but it's very, very important that the mediator has that ability to empathize with the parties, and also sometimes to, as I said, fold them and hold them, sometimes pull back a little bit, sometimes say, well, okay, I see you're very strongly committed to that, but I noticed from the other side that they're kind of emphasizing this point. And all the time it is the parties who are deciding to move. A little bit of coaching.
You've gone into therapy.
It's great. It's great.
It's therapy.
Yeah, but it's a commercial decision. It's about, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about deciding, because, for example, I have been involved in, disputes, let's say, involving building companies and then clients, and they're unhappy about the quality of building, etc. But they've also got a building. They've also got something. And sometimes people say, oh, this is a joke, but it's not a joke. It has to be apportioned. You look at the contract that was originally there. You look at what the commitment was. You look at what has been received. Okay, so maybe it's an only 80% job. So that means you're really only entitled to 20%. But sometimes people have to understand that. You have to work through it. And in working through it, you have a very good chance of getting a solution. Trust me, Conal.
How long do these negotiations go on for? Because you mentioned at the end of the day, and I was wondering can you do it in a day?
I'm thinking of Roy Keane here, at the end of the day. But yeah, you can do it in a day, and that's better, really. There should be a focal point. There should be, sometimes people need to move, and it's kind of, It's only at the kind of the 11th hour that people can sort of, really sort of focus the mind. Other than that, they can play around with it. But nobody is boxed in. This is the important thing. Nobody's boxed in. And if it doesn't resolve itself at the end of the day, you can continue on and you can keep it open and you can have interactions with the parties. And it may require, somebody to go back to an office and have further discussions, and reflect on things a bit more. And therefore, but even if it doesn't resolve itself, and, the statistics, when it's done properly, Conal, it has to be done properly. The statistics are of a very high success rate, 80% plus, of disputes can be resolved in this way. But even if they're not resolved, they can be very informative and they can sort of establish, the circumstances in which a settlement can be achieved down the line. And a settlement is always your friend in law. You don't want to go into court and come out and have me telling you a sad story as to why the judge found against you.
And you said that just both sides sign an agreement when they are agreed. That, I presume, is legally binding, or is it? Or can I leave you and say, I've signed that? Nah, I didn't like that, and go back into court?
No. Okay, so there's two agreements. There's the agreement at the start, and then hopefully the agreement at the end. And that's a binding contract.
Okay.
Because you enter into terms of settlement of the proceedings. The mediation has been successful. Both parties sign up to an agreement. That agreement is binding and that agreement can be enforced in court. And it is a binding contract. But the mediation agreement at the start is only that both parties are willing to come together, that the hardworking mediator gets a few bob. I
noticed that's at the beginning.
But it is very, very important that people know they can walk out at any stage.
Okay.
I've had enough, Cuddle,
And agreements like this have to be presumably registered somewhere.
No, they don't. I mean, it's agreed between the parties.
No, so, at the end, when we're both agreed that it's whatever the settlement is, does that not register somewhere?
No, it'll be a contract between the two parties.
And the reason I mentioned that is I was just wondering because you're very keen on the fact that it's confidential, but if it's registered...
the terms are confidential, but it can be disclosed to court for the purposes of enforcement. You get an order of specific performance of an existing contract. So, for example, if there's a row, etc., and you agree that under the terms of this, you're going to pay X amount of money, and the recipient of that money is going to give you 10 acres of land, and that's written into a contract, that's a binding contract. You go into court and you can enforce it then.
Okay. And presumably your learned friends who love a bit of commercial litigation can't be mad keen about this stuff, is it?
Well,
you eating their lunch?
It's a bit like, as you are an avid listener to the Fifth Court.
It's a very fine podcast, I believe.
Well, you might recall I had the pleasure of talking to a man called Leif Nissen Ludbeck.
It was a brilliant episode.
Oh, well, thank you, Conal. But he was a fascinating character. And he was talking about AI.
Yeah.
And I mean,
as we keep reminding people, not artificial insemination.
No.
Which we would have been talking about 30 years ago.
That's back down on the farm. We're not on the farm for this one. But it's like that has the potential to revolutionise the legal system and also affect that most beloved aspect of solicitors' practices, the billable hour.
Yes.
So, but yet they're embracing it. So they have to embrace it.
And that is now. That's not in the future. That's German companies at CSM or CMS or something.
CMS.
They are using that now for 7,000 solicitors, I think.
Yes, they are. And I mean, but they've moved with the times. Now, I mean, it doesn't mean that lawyers are redundant. They will still be needed. But I mean, tedious work of going through documents and finding stuff can be replaced by AI. I mean, AI is incredible what it can do. I mean, I was in another program I was invited on at one stage after the Dublin riots when all these guards had to be sent to look through CCTV footage throughout the city in order to try and identify people who are running amok. That could have been done very quickly with AI. So, I mean, manpower will be replaced by AI. And therefore, billable hours have to be replaced by AI. But in terms of mediation, I'm a huge fan. I'm actually a huge fan because I think sometimes litigation is very unsatisfactory. I really do. Whereas I think if you can mediate a settlement, you have to consider all aspects. And it is very important as a mediator. And as a mediator, I would, again, I have to gain people's confidence, so I don't sort of trash anybody's way of thinking. I will go with that. You don't have to like the parties as such, but you have to understand what they're saying, and you have to understand their concerns, and you have to be able to engage. It is part psychology, but also with the notion of what is in the background, i.e. litigation, and what they're facing if they can't come to an arrangement.
And asking a lawyer like you about money and fees, I know it's just impossible, you'll never give me a straight answer, but typically, is there a massive saving to be made?
There is an absolutely massive saving to be made. Okay, if it is at a certain level, I mean, obviously, let's say there is a kind of a minor dispute whereby somebody goes into the district court. Well, then the district court judge is, paid by the state to resolve that issue. So, it mightn't be worth your while then to go to mediation. But even if you're getting into the circuit court, if it's going to be a trial, if it's contentious, if it's going to go into a second day, referring it to a mediator. But you see, sometimes litigators get upset about this because they go into mediation with no belief, don't really want to engage in it. It's a waste of time, and then they have to go in and litigate anyway. And then the client has to pay the fees of mediation on top of this, and everybody's crying a river. Okay? So but if you believe that this can be resolved, if you want a resolution, and remember, it's the parties that take control of it, Conal. At the end of the day, you might have to cede something, you might have to trade something, but you're in control of that. You make that offer to the other side. You say, look, I'm going to go down the road with you as far as this, but I need you to come back. You're in control. You're not sitting there looking at a judge telling you what to do, And I think it's really, really important. And it is, I have seen it. It can be very, very successful. But the parties need to engage with it in good faith, but it is down to the mediator. I'm telling you, Conal, it's very important. Get the right mediator.
And it is, as you say, the future. Now, you do know, and if you don't know, it means that you haven't been listening to the show, is that there is a final question we ask everybody, because you have your final question you also ask. We ask people, who would they hire in a heartbeat? Do you remember that question?
I do remember that question. I do remember that question. I know what I'm going to ask
you to do. My gorgeous former boss, Micheál O'Murdig.
Yes.
And I was going to say to you, talk to me about Micheál O'Murdig for 2 minutes, because you knew him.
Yes.
And I loved him. He was a magnificent boss.
You had the pleasure of working directly with him. I worked in RTE when he was there.
He was my chair of my first job.
And I ended up in commentary boxes with him and press boxes with him. And he was a wonderfully generous individual, and that is true. People say that about people, but in this case, he had time for everybody. He had a memory that was just incredible. He could remember matches, he could remember individuals, he could remember connections, and he went around the country, and the country was his landscape. He could land at a match in the north, he could land down in his beloved West Kerry, he could go, to Galway, and he'd go in and talk to people. He could go into the inner city of Dublin, and he was able to engage. And that's where he taught all his life in O'Connell School, right in the heart of the inner city of Dublin. He had that just incredible ability to engage with people. He was so quick-witted. I mean, you've seen all the commentary, the commentary statements, and all of that sort of stuff. He was so quick-witted and could come up with a line. And if you threw a question at him, he had that beautiful way, the beautiful kind of Kerry lilt, West Kerry lilt, and the Gaeilge, and the way it would come in. And also Gaeilge. What did he do for Gaeilge? It was amazing. He made Irish so attractive to people, and also he wasn't a purist, Conal. I mean, he would switch between the two. I speak both Irish and English, so please don't adjust your set. Remember the old gags. So it was all of that sort of stuff. He was a very, very special individual, and 93 years of age. What a wonderful life! What an absolutely wonderful life, and what a contribution he made to Irish society.
And again, my many, many memories of him was driving around with him, and he started talking about horses. Geez, what he didn't know about horses. And then he started on about the hounds. And I'm looking at him saying, what do you not know about? He was an incredible person.
Yes. Fantastic. Oh, no, fantastic. Did you hear the famous interview? I know they all refer to it, but the interview with Prince Edward after the dog won in White City or Walthamstow or wherever it was. I mean, that was it. And no bother. Could talk to anybody and just had that wonderful, just that wonderful way about him.
So maybe you'd like to hire him in a heartbeat.
Well, I would hire him in a heartbeat. But I was thinking, you threw this on me. I wasn't actually expecting this, Conal. It's been about a year since I was in this studio.
I sent you the email, which I sent in everybody. But there you go.
Really? Okay. Oh, very good. Very good. You know who I got to hire in a heartbeat?
Please.
A fella who's looking for a job. Ciaran Cuffe.
Okay.
Ciaran Cuffe, sadly, in my opinion, lost his seat in, and I'm not a member of the Green Party, just to say that for the record, but he lost his seat in the Dublin Euro seat in the recent European elections. I think he was a phenomenal MEP. He did so much work at Europe, and you need Irish politicians who can get stuck in and can get things done. And it's not everybody can do that, and he did that. And I think he's a very genuine individual. I think he gave his heart and soul to it. He always told the truth in his way. I'm not saying that nobody else does, but he's a great guy. And I always have a huge amount of fondness for him, Connell, because many, many moons ago, you remember the Gresham, that used to be Sunday lunch for the O'Moroyne family all those years ago, was it?
There is a Gresham Hotel, and I'd say I've been in it twice.
Up the top of O'Connell Street. But there used to be these most amazing trees that were growing there for 200 years, and they were proper trees. And the birds, would nest in the trees, and all this sort of stuff. And in their wisdom, Dublin City Council decided to cut them down. Great idea. And I remember Ciaran Cuffe. I think I have a memory. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's more a folk memory, but I think I'm right in this. Your listeners can write in if I'm not. But I think Ciaran Cuffe chained himself to one of those trees before it was cut down. So I think that is the sign of the man. I would employ him in a heartbeat. No, but really, I think he's a loss to the city of Dublin. I think he's a loss to Ireland. He was a wonderful representative in the European Parliament. Hope he stays in politics, and I hope he continues to make a contribution.
Well, he might be a lobbyist, of course. That is the voice, the lovely, lilting voice of Peter Leonard, who is one half of the Fifth Court podcast. And if you haven't heard him and his buddy, Mark Tottenham, you have
Mark
missed...
who?
He's going to kill you for that. They are brilliant. And if you want to know about law in their right sense, it's a lovely way of learning, including about AI and everything else. Fantastic. Peter Leonard, thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show. Maxol, a family-owned business since 1920, has introduced Maxol HVO Pro, a low-carbon emissions fuel, to their network. This low-carbon emission fuel can play a key role as part of your business's sustainability strategy. Available at selected locations nationwide for fuel card customers, Maxol HVO Pro is 100% renewable biodiesel with up to 90% lower carbon emissions. It's compatible with most newer diesel engines and is recommended for fleet vehicles. Visit maxol.ie/HVO Pro for more information.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com. That Great Business Show.
As Labour in the UK assumes power after many years out in the cold, it looks like they could be there for quite a while. Some commentators say they won't touch Brexit. Others aren't so sure, as it is now accepted that Brexit has, as expected, been an economic disaster for our largest trading partner. The British and Irish Trading Alliance, or BITA as it's known, is a non-profit networking organisation with a community of businesses that hosts networking, educational and social events online and in venues across all of their chapters, both in the UK and Ireland. And they also have a global forum which includes the USA and Australia. And they pride themselves on their ability to match buyers with sellers and vice versa. Billy Griffin is owner of a business called Artisan that happens to do business into the UK, but he's also chairperson of the Dublin chapter of BITA, and he also happens to be in studio with me now. So Billy Griffin, welcome to That Great Business Show.
Good afternoon, Connell, and good afternoon to your listeners as well.
Artisan is your business. What does Artisan do?
We manufacture signs. It's very visual. So if you look at the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre and you see that big 16-metre high sign, that's one of our statement pieces. And if you go down to Oxford Street and the junction of Tottenham Court Road. If you look up 44 floors, you'll see that big centre point sign that beams across London. So that's our signs. That's in essence what we do, high-end architectural signage.
How did you get into that?
Kind of by accident, in the sense that I was in school, and a friend of a family had a small manufacturing company, and I ended up working summers with them. And then as I left school, worked for them for a number of years. And after I finished college, just got the opportunity then in my early 30s to form a business, and I did.
Fabulous. And if I have been onto your website, you do some lovely work.
Ah, shucks.
Who's the brains or the artist behind your signs? And I better make sure that people understand now, we're talking about serious signage, not eat at Joe's or something like that.
I guess it's a company effort. Originally started up my then business partner, Art Mooney. He would have been looking after the art side of things. I would look after production.
Was that his first name, Art?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay.
It is still. But it's a team effort. You know, we'd have visual artists, we'd painters. Our spray painter does clay modelling. It's really a team effort. I'd have to say that. I'm not, throwing out platitudes here. It is a team effort.
And it is a small but perfectly formed SME.
Perfectly.
What is your happiest memory of work that you've done?
I mean, if you want to look at it in terms of, our raison d'etre, it would be realising the design intent. So when you take something that's 2D off a page and you make it manifest, it's a bit of a mouthful. But when you get something that's like, you said your brother was an architect, Mise Plaza there. That's a big 6 metre long bronze sign. And you can only get bronze sheets.
Did you make that?
Yeah, we did.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So when you get something that's really difficult to manufacture and requires a really high level of finish, and it's not just the physical, the structural elements of it, but the aesthetic of it as well. And when it really does what it says on the tin, it's very satisfying.
And what's very satisfying for me is made in Ireland.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we do, that we pride ourselves in, is that we would have done the Urban Outfitters stores across Europe during the 2010s.
That's a nice gig.
Yeah. Do you know, I had a young family at that time, and there were tumbleweeds blowing through the streets here in retail.
I remember that as well.
Yeah. So and you mentioned Britain, but in 2016, we still at the latter end of the recession, we exported 90% of everything we did. So while, with everything that goes on in immigration, the debate about immigration, I understand people's, concerns around it. We've been emigrating for years. We've been exporting our products. There needs to be a balanced debate there.
BITA. Talk to me about BITA and why you are involved with BITA as Chair of Ireland.
Well, BITA is a fantastic organisation. The first thing to say, it's a not-for-profit. The second thing, it's headed by an extraordinary man, Paul Whitnell. Paul was part of all of us that really experienced that, the Great Recession, as we call it, or as it's called.
Which of the many? The 1980s, the 2000, 2008? Or which one would you like to choose as your Great Recession? Actually, that should be one of my questions. A standard question is, which Great Recession do you remember?
I think definitely the Great Recession. I remember around 2012, and my daughter was born at that time, and I remember, my wife and I, we shared obviously shared all the duties. And then when Erin was teething, just lying in bed with her at night and thinking, how am I going to, business is terrible. How am I going to look after her? What are we going to do? What if business goes? These are the things that run through your mind at 4:00 in the morning.
Yep, which is, I'm really trying to get that across about how difficult business can be.
Yeah.
You don't sleep, look at it, can eat you up.
Yeah.
However, BITA, get back to BITA.
Yes, yes.
You're going to tell me why BITA.
Now you digress, Connell, not me.
I do. Listen, I go down every little rabbit hole.
Yeah, look, we, as I said, we did a lot of work in Europe, in mainland Europe and the UK. I think we did about 5 or 6 Urban Outfitters stores.
How did you win that?
Because of what we do. We were working with a shop fitter at the time, and Urban Outfitters couldn't make what they were looking for. They couldn't manufacture, couldn't get anybody to manufacture what they were doing in Europe. And we were able to do it for them. So it's just a case of having the skill set and, as importantly, the mindset and the manufacturing facilities, as you said, here in Ireland, to do that. So we were installing signs in Berlin, in Nuremberg, in Brussels, in London, all through the 2010s.
And thank you for mentioning London, because Brexit has been an absolute abomination, hasn't it? I
think you're understating it. I'd use this four-letter word a company would show to describe it. I think I won't go into the politics of it. But the direct reasons behind it, but I feel it was always politically driven. Any objective person could see that it was always going to be a disaster for the UK, and when the economics arguments couldn't be won, immigration was dragged into it. Now the extraordinary thing is there's more people coming into the UK than before Brexit. So there, again, it's castle built on sand. The foundations just were never there. The idea that Britain held all the cards is just a fallacy. We live in an open trading world. Britain is an open trading economy. And that should have been apparent from the word go. But it wasn't. It just got mixed up with immigration. Then people thought, oh, right, and 350 million a week for the NHS. It was bull, basically. And I'll come back to your question in a second, but you talk about practical implications of Brexit. I've had to send vans over to London, to Manchester. I've goods stuck in Liverpool for 3 weeks that I couldn't get out. And thankfully the job was delayed because it was an opening. And I've had to drive up myself to Belfast, meet a van coming in and bring it back down to Dublin. Now, this is stuff that previously would have been done overnight. We used to get aluminium extrusions done in Nottingham. We now go to Belgium. Oh gosh, I'm surprised they're still here. It's extraordinary.
What can BITA do about Brexit? How can you help people? Is it still, it's a massive market. It's English speaking, which we love. Is it still worth going into the UK to do business?
It still is. I think that what's always been the case with Britain is it's an expensive market to do business in. Compared to any of the other markets, it is expensive.
Meaning
that it's only a flight away. So everybody does it. If you think of exporting, you're going to go to the UK.
Yeah.
So what BITA can do for companies is that it's a channel to market. And Paul set up BITA, Paul Whitnell, he set up BITA because he found that when he went to the UK, he couldn't get doors open. There was gatekeepers there all the time. When he came up with the idea of the British and Irish Trading Alliance, it opened doors straight away. And that's the Irish connection. It's the diaspora living in Ireland and in England. And there's that trust factor that's been built up, people travelling. I lived in England myself for 2 years in the early 1990s. You have that immediate bond. And what it does is it opens up that network. Okay, so I'm looking to meet Connell. Do you know him? Yes, I do. Why would I introduce you to? Firstly, you're part of BITA. Secondly, you don't want to dirty your bib within it because BITA is built on values. It's built on honesty and integrity. And if you're not that type of person, BITA isn't for you. So, and also then you have the thing of what Paul calls capital information. So you're privy to, if you're looking for and I won't call it inside track, you're looking for information on jobs coming up. You ring somebody within BITA and there's various chapters in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool. We've 4 chapters in Ireland. So you've ample opportunity to contact like-minded people. And there's 13 chapters worldwide. There's one in the United States, in Dubai, South Africa. So there's huge opportunities there for networking.
But go back to Brexit, and you told me about your own direct experience of things being stuck and paperwork and. Why would you bother? What's the point? Would you not just go and deal with Brussels, deal with Germany, deal with Spain, deal with whomsoever outside of the UK?
Yeah, well, I think, what is it, Winnie the Pooh said, yes, please, both, thank you. And what we're doing at the moment, we're looking at the export markets in the Middle East as well. And Enterprise Ireland have been great to us in that regard. And they're helping us as well to access those markets. I think we have a very good relationship with some of the really big architectural firms in the UK, and they trust us. They trust us to carry out to make their designs, to realise their designs. So one of them in particular has been asked us to set up a UK office for ages. So we have a UK representative now.
And you could, of course, set up in either Newry or in Belfast and still be within the UK, that lovely little workaround that is sitting up there.
Yes, we could. Yeah. It's really, you want to be on the ground where you're actually able to go into the offices once a week. People like, as my dad was from Cork, he'd say familiar. They like the ability for you to drop in on spec. They like you to be able to drop in once a week or once a fortnight, shoot the breeze, get a coffee. Okay, if this sign going in a particular, it's either a protected structure. How would we treat it? What's the materiality? What's the planning conditions? All of these things. So they want to be able to swing in on spec.
And that goes for all businesses, not just yours, I presume. So go back to Brexit again. What's your own view? Will they actually kind of ever so gently just make it disappear, or can they, or does anybody know?
I think, like most things, it needs time to take the heat out of it. You look at the polls.
2016 is when this started.
I know. Yeah. But it is a generational thing. Britain joined the then common market. It was 1974 or 72. I can't remember. I think it was 74.
I can't remember now, but it was Heath, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And then it took a long time for them to come out. So likewise, it'll take a long time, I believe, to go back in. I think it'll be mission creep. I think you'll get part of into the single market because it needs it. Britain's a trading nation. You need to get rid of barriers to trade, and I think people realise it in the UK that Brexit is a four-letter word show that we talked about, and I think.
Well, some people do, but they still are some big names in business, particularly in financial services, who think it's God's gift.
Yeah, now that comes down to financial regulation. And to be honest with you, that probably was the reason that certain sections of the financial services industry supported it, because they would view it as regulation from Brussels. And really, they view the Brexiteer, the buccaneering spirit of Britain would have been compromised by it.
Yeah, light regulation or super light regulation by your pals in Bank of England or wherever it was. Yeah.
Singapore on Thames.
But then still, you're not going to shy away from the UK, and BITA is not going to shy away from the UK, but you want members, I presume, and you want to encourage people to do business into the UK.
I love that phrase that President Obama used, delayed gratification. We live in society where there's instant gratification. In terms of going into markets, you need a long-term plan. You need a long-term vision, and you won't succeed overnight. So I think going into the British market, you need tenacity and you need a long-term strategy and a long-term vision for it.
Now, by long-term, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years?
I would say you'd need a minimum of 2 years, 3 years. But I think what BITA provides, what you said earlier, is a route to market. It's a channel to market. Going over without any access to market is, I would see it as costly. You need to either piggyback in on another, a bigger firm, or the likes of BITA, or use government sources. But BITA, it's not for profit. It has everybody's interests at heart. It's reasonably cost effective to join. But
how much?
I'd have to come back to you on it.
But hundreds or thousands? Hundreds. Yeah.
But I do feel, and certainly the sense of community that I felt joining it has been absolutely, wonderful.
Just as a matter of interest, what did it do for you?
I think what it did was it got me out into the ether of networking. And I've been networking a long time. I'm a production person at heart, but I got into the artistic side of it. But what I had to do was I had to get comfortable with networking. But what BITA really made me comfortable with is going into a room and walking up to somebody and shaking their hand and saying, "Hi, I'm Billy. I'm from Artisan. How are you today? What is it you do?" And the old rule
they say, "We make signs," and you say the wrong answer.
yeah. Keep walking, fella.
And so back to BITA again, is that what you can do for them? Introduce open doors, yes, and yes. Close the sale, no. Nobody can close the sale except yourself.
Yeah, do you know what it does? It helps. It influences. the people in BITA will advise you who the influencers are, who are the gatekeepers. And that's the closure to sale.
Across all sectors, or is it specific? You sound to me like you're very strong in the construction sector, or is that just because that's your area?
Yeah,
if I'm a biggie manufacturer, is it a good place to be?
Yeah, the old custard creams, eh?
Oh, now I know what you like.
It's I would say that it's weighted towards the construction sector, but there's a lot of professional services firms, solicitors, accountants, would be part of it. But no denying it is weighted towards construction sector. But there's all sorts of, there's recruitment firms, financial firms. It's a broad church.
The recruitment companies seem to appear at all of those kind of events, don't they?
I know.
And everybody runs. Oh no, I won't say that.
They're wonderful people.
Of course they are.
Blessed are the cheesemakers.
Anybody who wants to know more will find you at BITA, which is the British and Irish Trading Alliance. But we do have a final question for you, and I do know, because I have talked to you about this,
yes,
about that you actually know, that we ask, who would Billy Griffin hire in a heartbeat?
I'd hire Bill Gates without a shadow of a doubt. I think for a number of reasons. Number one, you can go back to when he originally started out building one of the greatest companies in the world, putting a PC into everybody's rooms and connecting the world. But I think his philanthropic works, it's just extraordinary what he's done, to try and eliminate malaria, eliminate child mortality. What he's doing in terms of the green revolution is nothing short of, it's extraordinary. I think he's put $45 billion into it, continues to pour. He's poured $1 billion into a nuclear plant in Wisconsin, I think it is, bringing jobs in part of a rust bucket to badly needed jobs, and at the same time facilitating the green revolution. I'm very, very committed, it's an awful use the word passionate about the transition to net zero, but I am seriously. We'd have 40 solar panels on the roof of our factory. On a good day, it's powering all the machines. On a bad day, it's lighting the factory.
That's fabulous. Well done.
Yeah.
Go back to Bill Gates. One thing that he was meant to do, and this is probably my sewer-like mind, one thing that I haven't seen it do yet, he was trying to eliminate flushing toilets. Remember that project he had?
I do, yeah.
I wonder whatever happened to that one.
It's still ongoing. There's that great image of him taking recycled sewage water and drinking it, and that's very Bill. Of course, it's logical. It's been treated, and there's your sewer mind.
Well, I'll tell you, my mind would be saying, "Good luck with that."
Yeah,
ain't going into COM, I can tell you.
But Brexit is like that. Brexit was driven on emotion. It wasn't driven on logic. And Bill Gates, he has a very clear mind and a very clear vision on things, but he's driven towards betterment of mankind. And I think that's a very, very, it's a wonderful legacy.
Did you write to him?
Did I write to him?
And ask him to join you?
No, I didn't.
Would he like a big Microsoft sign?
Connell, I wanted you all for myself. I wasn't going to share the limelight with anybody else, even Bill Gates.
That is Billy Griffin of BITA, but also of Artisan. And did I see that you have a second company or something? Did you send me a second link?
Yeah, it's a company called EISTA. It's and we wanted to create a wayfinding system that was, came from Ireland, and with the name EISTA, it's Irish for minimal. And we see it for something for contemporary buildings. We wanted to create a product that, would last rather than building something from scratch. So EISTA is a bespoke signage system made from common parts. So the EISTA is the commonality of the parts, and then the.
Do you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to get you a big business opportunity.
Yeah.
This government, Mr. Harris, Taoiseach,
yes,
he could put his name down in history if he were to choose to put name signs on every street in this country. Because we're nuts. Do you ever try to walk around Dublin City and say to people, where am I? Now, of course, I was born here. I know it. You try to get around. It would be a simple, cheap thing. Of course, no, not cheap, value thing.
Yeah.
If we had a new, gorgeously designed, Irish designed road signage all on every street in the country. How about that?
Do you know why that is, Connell? It's because everybody describes, where is it? It's next to the Blue Haven.
Well,
it's next to the old stand.
And if you don't know where the Blue Haven is, we're talking about the top of the Dublin Mountains or damn near.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's the Blue Light.
The Blue Light, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the Blue Haven is the local to myself in Ballyrone. It's a good plug. It's a great pint of Guinness there.
Okay, you got your freebie. Okay.
Yeah.
Billy Griffin of BITA, thank you so much for joining us.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com.
That great business show.
And that is it for episode 199 of That Great Business Show. Great business insights and inspiration, as always. And Maxall, a family-owned business for over 100 years, advertised with us so that you can get all of these best tips and insights for your business. So return them the favour and sign up for their fuel card. It is great for your business. And do sign up for our personal copy of the podcast at thatgreatbusinessshow.com. Share, like, and do give us 5-star reviews because it does help us as well. And why not advertise with us? I just told you, Maxall does. Later, studio manager Peter Rice and post-production engineer Neil Horner triple the treble and double the bass to ensure that we remain the world's best-sounding business podcast. So from me, Conal O'Moran, buchas to you all, agus slán tamil.